Let me start by saying you're not alone. It's not uncommon for the router in your home network to provide inadequate Wi-Fi signal to all areas of your home, and you need to extend your Wi-Fi signal as a result. It's also not unusual if you get overwhelmed by the sheer number of devices that are available to extend your Wi-Fi network. The whole purpose of this video today is to go over 3 of the most popular solutions at a high level. Namely, we're talking about Wi-Fi extenders, wireless access points, and mesh Wi-Fi. This will hopefully help you decide which solutions are possibilities for your home network. And then I've gone and made more detailed videos comparing these devices head to head if you need to do more research when picking out a device for your home network. But for now, let's take a look at these 3 devices and how they're different from each other. Let's start by talking about wireless access points. Now, when you hear wireless access points, I want you to think about an access point as essentially a duplication of your router. What I mean by this is that access points, they take the settings of your router and they basically rebroadcast them. This means that they broadcast the same Wi-Fi network name and password, which just makes things really convenient for the devices in your home network because they can move throughout your home and they will seamlessly connect to either your router or your access point, whichever one is giving a stronger Wi-Fi signal. When it comes to the benefits of access points, first and foremost, they provide great performance. This is largely linked to the fact that your router and access point are connected with an Ethernet cable. This results in an extremely reliable connection between these 2 devices, which means that any devices connecting to your access point will also have a reliable connection. In general, Ethernet cables provide more reliable and faster connections. So as a result, when you have an access point connected to your router with an Ethernet cable, the devices connecting to that access point get those benefits as well. Another benefit, one which we've already covered, is the fact that your router and access point will broadcast the same Wi-Fi network name and password. You don't have to manually switch between Wi-Fi networks when you're moving devices throughout your home. This makes things very convenient. The last benefit about access points is you're not limited to just having one in your home network. You can scale up and add as many access points as you need if you have a home with a lot of square footage or you live on multiple levels. You just need to make sure that you can provide an Ethernet connection from those access points to your router. And talking about the downsides of access points, for the same reason we were praising them from a performance standpoint, a lot of people might have trouble connecting a router and access point with an Ethernet cable. Along the same lines, another downside of access points is the setup might be a little bit more complex than these other devices, just because you need to map out this Ethernet cable connection and how exactly you're going to implement that in your home network. Now let's cover mesh Wi-Fi. The key here, when you hear mesh Wi-Fi, I want you to think of mesh Wi-Fi as essentially implementing access points, but all of these devices are wirelessly connected to each other. So what you would have is you would have your modem connected to a main node. So this main node replaces the router in your home network. And then when you implement what's called a satellite node or additional mesh nodes in your home network, they will all communicate with your main node wirelessly. Similarly to wireless access points, is mesh nodes also all broadcast the same Wi-Fi network name and password, making things really easy on your devices when you move them throughout your home, because they will automatically connect to the mesh node that provides them with the best Wi-Fi signal. In terms of the benefits of a mesh Wi-Fi network, you get really good performance out of this solution. Now, you might not get top of the line performance that you get when you implement access points in your home network, but you still get really good performance with a mesh Wi-Fi network. On top of that, mesh networks are really easy to set up and then scale up and scale down. Especially once you have this main node set up in your home network, it's really easy to add nodes or remove nodes from your mesh Wi-Fi network. This makes it a really scalable and flexible solution that meets the needs of many people. Another benefit about mesh Wi-Fi networks is depending upon the make and model that you get, you may be able to daisy chain your mesh nodes together. What this basically means is that all of your satellite nodes don't necessarily have to be in range of that main node. You can link your mesh nodes together. So you can have your main node, you can have a satellite node connected to that, and then you can have another satellite node that's connected to your other satellite node. This gives you a lot of flexibility if you need to extend your Wi-Fi network really far in one direction, because you can daisy chain a few mesh nodes together. In terms of the negatives of a mesh Wi-Fi network, they're usually more expensive than the other solutions in terms of whether you're going to implement an access point or a Wi-Fi extender. It's a little more expensive, and that's because it's a more comprehensive solution. You'll need to replace the router in your home network in order to implement a mesh Wi-Fi network. And as a result, you'll get your main node and at least one satellite node, which will be more expensive than buying just one access point or one extender for your home network. Now let's cover Wi-Fi extenders. With traditional Wi-Fi extenders, what they would do is they would take the existing Wi-Fi signal from your router. They would essentially serve as a device that's connecting to your router, and they would rebroadcast your Wi-Fi signal to other areas of your home. The downside of this is that your Wi-Fi extender and your router would be communicating on the same Wi-Fi channels that all of your other devices were, and as a result of this, you wouldn't get great performance out of traditional extenders. The good news is Wi-Fi extenders have evolved over time, and newer Wi-Fi extenders provide a lot more flexibility because they offer different modes of operation. Newer Wi-Fi extenders have 3 modes of operation: extender mode, which I've already covered, access point mode, and mesh mode. Now, access point mode and mesh mode might sound familiar after already covering these devices, but let's take another look at what these different modes of operation mean. We've already covered extender mode and how it works, but basically your extender connects to your Wi-Fi router and then rebroadcasts that Wi-Fi signal. One other aspect about extender mode is that the Wi-Fi signal that it rebroadcasts, it does it with a different Wi-Fi network name and password. So unlike access points and mesh Wi-Fi networks, if you're moving devices throughout your home and you have a Wi-Fi extender operating in extender mode, you'll need to manually reconnect to a different Wi-Fi network if you're closer to your extender than you are to your router. When it comes to access point mode, your extender operates honestly just like an access point. It connects to your router with an Ethernet cable, and then it rebroadcasts a Wi-Fi signal, and it's the same one that your router is rebroadcasting. When it comes to mesh mode, this might look familiar as well because your extender and your router, they communicate wirelessly and they broadcast the same Wi-Fi network name and password. So essentially your extender is just serving as a satellite node in a mesh Wi-Fi network if it's operating in mesh mode. I will say though that in order for an extender to operate in mesh mode, it needs to be made by the same manufacturer as your router, and both of these devices need to support mesh mode. So I know you might be thinking, mesh mode and extender mode, those look like very similar setups when it comes to your extender and your router. So what's the difference between these two? Well, the difference is that in mesh mode, your extender and your router are communicating on different Wi-Fi channels than the rest of your devices are that are connected to either your router or your extender. Because these two devices are communicating with each other on different channels, there's no interference from other devices, and as a result, you get faster performance and faster communication between your router and extender. So when we're talking about the benefits of Wi-Fi extenders, the first is obviously how flexible they are. You can use it in the mode that provides your home with the best Wi-Fi performance, or the one that best fits your individual needs. On top of that, Wi-Fi extenders are usually the cheaper solution compared to access points and mesh Wi-Fi networks. So it's really easy if you want to add one to your home network, and there aren't too many barriers to do so. In terms of the downsides of Wi-Fi extenders, the first is that you might need to try a few different configurations in order to figure out which one provides you with the best performance in your home network. With that said, you usually will be able to use these devices in a way that provides you with good performance, but it just might take some time to get there. On top of that, Wi-Fi extenders, they don't scale as well as these other devices like access points or mesh Wi-Fi networks. If you only need to extend your Wi-Fi signal to one additional area of your home, extenders can be a great solution. But if you find that you need to extend your Wi-Fi signal to multiple areas of your home, Wi-Fi extenders might not be the best solution. Now that we've covered these 3 devices at a high level, I want to provide you with a summary table so we can summarize everything that we've talked about. And this will help you identify in terms of scalability, cost, performance, how these devices stack up against each other. And this will help you narrow down which device you might want to implement in your home network. With this information in hand, I want to run through some rapid fire scenarios about when you want to implement each of these devices in your home network. If performance is your top priority and you know you're going to have multiple devices connecting to this device that's extending your Wi-Fi network, you'll want to go with an access point or a mesh Wi-Fi network, or of course an extender in mesh mode. If you just need an easy solution and you're not going to have many devices connecting to this device, a Wi-Fi extender is a perfect solution here, especially with the flexibility of the 3 different modes of operation for newer Wi-Fi extenders. Similarly, if you only need to extend your Wi-Fi network to one more area of your home, a Wi-Fi extender with those 3 different modes of operation will be able to fit the bill there. Conversely, if you need to extend your Wi-Fi signal to multiple areas of your home, you'll want to look at access points or a mesh Wi-Fi network, and the limiting factor there will be if you can connect these devices to your router with an Ethernet cable. If you can, go for access points. If this needs to happen wirelessly, you'll want a mesh Wi-Fi network. And lastly, if budget is a concern for you, you don't want to break the bank and you still want to get extension of your Wi-Fi signal and good performance to new areas of your home, a Wi-Fi extender should do just fine there as well. Hopefully this information gets you started in terms of determining what solutions or possibilities for you when it comes to extending your Wi-Fi network. And in the description, I will include my more specific breakdowns or my more specific comparisons between these devices to help you take that next step and really narrow down exactly what device you need. I'd love to see in the comments section what device you end up going with in terms of extending your Wi-Fi network. And as always, thanks for watching this episode from Network from Home, and we'll catch you on the next one.